They say the greatest dangers aren't the ones that arrive with sirens or storms. They're the ones that move quietly, adjusting the world one rule at a time, one signature at a time, one warning at a time, until suddenly, a person no longer recognizes the life they are living. And in Crescent Heights, that danger had a name: the Homeowners Association. Most people think an HOA is nothing more than a committee, a handful of neighbors who argue about fences and paint colors. But Crescent Heights wasn't most neighborhoods. It was a structure, a machine, an invisible government built behind smiling faces and manicured lawns. Every rule was a brick, every warning was a chain, and every homeowner a controlled subject. But the beginning of this story isn't about the HOA directly. It's about the man who unknowingly walked straight into its jaws. His name was Ethan Cole, a quiet man, mid-30s, shoulders slightly slumped as if carrying the weight of memories he didn't talk about. He arrived on a calm Wednesday morning, the kind of morning where everything feels paused, like the world is inhaling before saying something important. A single moving truck, a single man, a single life shifting into a place that looked peaceful on the surface and predatory beneath it. I watched from my living room window, the way the old residents always watched everything in Crescent Heights, silently, carefully, pretending not to stare while observing every detail. Ethan didn't fit the neighborhood mold. He didn't have the forced cheerfulness, the stiff posture, the robotic routine. Instead, he moved with a naturalness, like someone not yet reshaped by the HOA's invisible hands. And almost immediately, Crescent Heights reacted. It began with the smallest sign, the kind of sign only those who'd lived there long enough understood. The blinds, one by one, as Ethan carried his boxes, the blinds of almost every house on the street tilted open, revealing narrow slits of eyes, watching him, studying him, measuring him like a new variable in a tightly controlled experiment. No one walked over to welcome him. No one brought cookies. No one asked if he needed help. In Crescent Heights, nobody welcomed newcomers. They evaluated them. There was only one person who did walk toward him that morning, and even she didn't come with friendliness. Her name carried weight in the neighborhood, like a judge, like an overseer, like a force of nature that people feared more than storms. Marlene Hartley, president of the Crescent Heights HOA, a woman in her late 50s, always dressed in pressed, pastel suits that felt too formal for suburban streets. Her hair was silver but styled immaculately, not a strand out of place. Her smile? Well, her smile was the most unsettling part about her. It held no warmth. It was simply an expression of confidence, assurance, and something else, something colder. The smile of someone who knew they owned the ground you stood on. She approached Ethan with the slow, deliberate steps of a person who believed every inch of the street belonged to her. And from my window, I heard her voice. Calm, controlled, sharp as a blade hidden inside velvet. "Welcome to Crescent Heights, Mr. Cole. I trust you've read the community guidelines?" Ethan paused, wiping sweat from his forehead. "I skimmed them," he said, still settling in. Marlene's smile tightened, the corners lifting without a hint of softness. "Oh, we take our guidelines very seriously here. They're what keep this community safe." Safe. That word always meant something different when the HOA used it. Ethan nodded politely, unaware of the web already tightening around him. "We expect full compliance," Marlene continued. "No exceptions. Someone from the committee will be monitoring your transition period closely." Monitoring. In any normal neighborhood, the word would sound absurd. In Crescent Heights, it was simply factual. Marlene handed him a thick envelope, heavier than any welcome packet had any right to be. Then she walked away, her heels clicking against the pavement with an authority that bordered on theatrical. Ethan watched her go, an unreadable expression flickering across his face. Confusion? Irritation? Maybe a small flicker of something deeper, something unsettled. He didn't yet know that every step he took from that moment onward would be measured, judged, recorded. But I knew, because I had lived through it. I had seen the warnings, the letters, the unspoken punishments. I had seen people broken down, not by violence, but by pressure. Slow, relentless pressure that squeezed every bit of individuality out of them. And I had seen what happened to those who resisted. Ethan's first violation came within hours, not days, not weeks, hours. By late afternoon, after the moving truck had left, he placed a simple wooden planter outside his porch, a weathered, handmade box filled with wildflowers. Beautiful, vibrant, imperfect, out of place in a neighborhood where even flowers had to match a predetermined palette. At 5:04 p.m., his first violation notice arrived, printed on crisp white paper and taped to his front door like a scarlet letter. Violation 3.4, unsanctioned landscaping. Remove immediately, $75 fine. He stared at the paper for several seconds, then at the flowers, then back again, the confusion shifting slowly into disbelief. I saw him glance toward Marlene's house, where the blinds shifted just slightly, watching, always watching. He sighed, lifted the planter, and moved it inside. A simple act. But in Crescent Heights, simple acts rarely stayed simple. The next morning, it escalated. He parked his car facing slightly outward instead of perfectly straight in the driveway. Another warning. He left his porch light on past 10 p.m. Another warning. He stepped outside barefoot. Yes, another warning. Bare feet were considered aesthetic disruption. Within 48 hours, Ethan had collected 4 official violations, more than most newcomers received in a month, and word spread quickly. Neighbors whispered as he walked by. Mailboxes opened and closed quietly when he approached. The morning joggers changed their route. The evening dog walkers didn't make eye contact. Crescent Heights had a way of isolating people without ever saying a word. But Ethan wasn't stupid. He wasn't oblivious. There was a sharpness in his eyes, the kind that absorbs patterns, reads between lines, senses unspoken truths. By day 3, he wasn't confused. He was suspicious, and suspicion is the one thing Crescent Heights never tolerated. On the 4th morning, at exactly 6:17 a.m., something unusual happened. Ethan stepped outside with a notebook, a small, black, worn notebook filled with scribbles and markings. He didn't know I was watching from my window. I don't think anyone else noticed. He walked slowly, observing everything. The houses, the mailboxes, the identical hedges, the security cameras perched at the same angle on every porch. And then something strange happened. He crouched beside a street drain, lifted the metal grate, and reached inside. He wasn't grabbing anything, he was checking something. After a few seconds, he nodded to himself and closed the grate. Then he looked around, eyes scanning for watchers, for cameras, for the quiet eyes behind the blinds. And then he looked directly at my window. For the first time, there was no smile, no wave, just an understanding look, a silent message. You see it too. That was the moment everything changed, because I realized Ethan wasn't just another homeowner. He wasn't scared. He wasn't overwhelmed. He was investigating. And Crescent Heights didn't like being investigated. Not by anyone, but especially not by someone like him. Because the HOA had secrets, deep secrets, dark secrets, secrets worth hiding, secrets worth fighting for. Secrets worth hurting for. And Ethan was about to uncover them, whether he wanted to or not. If Ethan's arrival had stirred unease in Crescent Heights, his curiosity ignited something far more dangerous: attention. Not the kind that comes with neighbors whispering behind curtains or glancing over fences, No, this was the attention that slithered quietly through the neighborhood, transmitted through unseen channels, encrypted meetings, and silent signals. The kind of attention the HOA kept reserved for one type of resident, a problem. By the fifth day, the air around his house felt different, like the neighborhood was holding its breath. The morning started with a sound none of us had heard in years, the rattling hum of an old lawnmower. Ethan was pushing it up and down his yard, the smell of gasoline drifting through the perfect air of Crescent Heights like an unwanted guest. In most places, the sound wouldn't matter. But here, where the HOA banned gas-powered equipment to maintain community tranquility, it was practically a declaration of war. And right on cue, Marlene appeared. She walked with her usual posture, straight spine, tightened jaw, slow steps, the kind that warned the earth beneath her to behave. Her pastel pink suit gleamed under the sun, crisp and sharp, as if ironed by someone terrified to disappoint her. I watched the confrontation unfold from behind my curtains. Mr. Cole. Her voice was polite but thin, stretched like a smile that had been held for too long. We do not allow gasoline lawn equipment in Crescent Heights. Ethan shut off the lawnmower and leaned on the handle. Morning, he said simply. You received the guidelines, I assume? He nodded. Yes. And you chose to ignore them? No, he said calmly. I chose to mow my lawn. Her eyes narrowed, a slow, calculated narrowing, as if adjusting the microscope slide that was Ethan. You're already at 4 violations, she reminded him. Another will put you under mandatory review for mowing my own property? Ethan asked. Review for disorder, she corrected. That word again, disorder. In Crescent Heights, disorder didn't mean mess. It meant non-compliance. It meant unpredictability. It meant threat. Ethan held her stare for several seconds, his expression unreadable. Then he said something dangerous, something no one had said to Marlene in a very, very long time. I don't think my lawn is your business. Silence. Even from my window, I felt it. The way the air thickened, the way the neighborhood seemed to lean in, the way every molecule paused. Marlene never raised her voice. She didn't argue. She didn't threaten. She simply smiled. A small, icy smile that meant more than a shout ever could. Everything in Crescent Heights, she whispered, is our business. She turned and walked away. And that should have been the end of it. But Ethan made a mistake. A small one. But in this neighborhood, small mistakes bloom like bruises. He finished mowing. He went inside. And he forgot to close his garage fully. It stayed open just a few inches. That was all it took. The violations came fast. Garage door must remain fully closed. $50 fine. Trash bin placed too close to sidewalk. $75 fine. Unauthorized object visible in garage. Improper curtain opacity. Car tire rotated 7 degrees off alignment. 7 violations in one day. No one had ever received that many in such a short time. Ethan didn't respond, didn't argue, didn't call the HOA office. He didn't even remove the notices. He simply left them taped to the door, the wind fluttering the paper edges like white flags, though nothing about Ethan felt like surrender. But the real shift began that night, at exactly 2:13 a.m. That was the moment Ethan stepped outside his house with a flashlight and notebook, writing something down as he aimed the beam along the. At first, I assumed he was documenting the violations. Then I realized something was wrong. Very wrong. He wasn't looking at houses. He wasn't looking at lights. He was looking at the street itself, running his fingers along the pavement, tapping the ground, tracing patterns like someone familiar with buried things. He knelt near a storm drain again, lifted the grate, but this time I saw what he was searching for. Wires. Long, thin, metallic wires. Threaded along the inside of the drain like roots of a metallic tree. Wires that weren't part of any public utility. Wires connected to something deeper, and Ethan was mapping them. Slowly, methodically, as if confirming a theory. He wasn't just suspicious. He knew. He knew Crescent Heights was hiding something. Something beneath the pavements, behind the houses, under the perfect surface the HOA proudly curated. And the neighborhood knew he knew. The next day, things escalated further. At dawn, strange vans appeared. Plain white, no logos, no plates. 3 men stepped out, dressed in navy blue overalls, carrying clipboards and tool bags. They didn't knock on doors or inspect anything visible. Instead, they opened utility boxes and peered into ground hatches as if checking something sensitive. When they reached Ethan's street, they stopped directly in front of his house. One of them glanced up toward my window and held the stare just a moment too long. Ethan came outside moments later, notebook in hand. "What are you doing?" he asked. The man closest to him didn't answer. He simply said, "Routine maintenance." Ethan's eyes flicked to the tool bag, far too heavy for routine maintenance, filled with cables, scanners, equipment I couldn't identify, even from a distance. "What maintenance?" Ethan pressed. The man lifted his clipboard and turned it around. It was blank, completely blank. No work orders, just crisp, untouched paper. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Who sent you?" he asked. The man finally met his gaze, cold, expressionless. "The association," he said. "Not HOA, not homeowners association. Simply the association, like it was something more, something bigger, something older." Ethan stepped closer, and the man stepped forward too, not aggressively, not violently, just enough to silently say, "Stop, don't, go back inside." Ethan did, not because he was scared, because he was calculating. The van stayed for another hour. Then they left as quietly as they arrived. But they did not leave the same neighborhood behind. That evening, the HOA sent Ethan a new letter. Not a violation, not a fine, a summons. Mandatory compliance hearing. Crescent Heights Community Hall, tomorrow, 4 p.m. Attendance required. This wasn't normal. Hearing? For what? The letter didn't list a reason. Just a dot. A time. A signature. Marlene Hartley, HOA President, Crescent Heights. But the signature was odd. It wasn't the usual neat script. It was hurried, uneven, as if written with a shaking hand, or someone else's hand entirely. And at the very bottom of the page, in faint, almost invisible ink, was a sentence. "We saw what you found." That was the night Ethan knocked on my door, for the first time. When I opened it, he stood there, tired eyes, notebook in hand, posture tense but controlled. "We need to talk," he said quietly. Not as a neighbor, not as a newcomer, but as someone who had stepped into something far beyond HOA rules. Something buried deep within Crescent Heights. Something the neighborhood didn't want anyone to know. That was the night everything began to unravel. The storm hadn't even started, but the entire neighborhood could feel it, like a pressure building in everyone's chest. The HOA's new emergency compliance meeting was announced only an hour ago, midnight के वक्त. किसी ने पहले कभी ऐसी मीटिंग नहीं देखी थी. Midnight HOA meeting? That alone was enough to make everyone uneasy. Cars slowly rolled into the cul-de-sac, headlights slicing through the fog that had strangely gathered that evening. So thick के घरों की outlines भी धुंधली नजर आ रही थी. Michael stood in his living room window, blinds slightly open, watching neighbors step out of their cars. सबके चेहरों पर एक अजीब सी टेंशन थी. कोई बात नहीं कर रहा था. Just walking silently toward the HOA building at the center. The building, normally bright, warm, and overly decorated, was now lit by a few dim bulbs flickering like they were about to die. Something's wrong, Michael whispered to himself. Emily walked up behind him, folding her arms. We shouldn't go, she said softly. We don't have a choice, Michael replied without looking away. If we don't show up, you know how they get. Emily looked down. Yes, she knew. Just last week, their neighbor Mrs. Hanover missed a meeting because she slipped in her kitchen. Next day, 3 HOA board members came to her door with a clipboard and a warning notice that her lack of participation reflected badly on the community morale. उस बेचारी को 2 दिन बाद हॉस्पिटल ले जाना पड़ा एंजाइटी अटैक के बाद। HOA ने उसके घर के बाहर कम्युनिटी रिस्क अंडर रिव्यू का बोर्ड लगा दिया था। इस नेबरहुड का सबसे डेंजरस चीज कोई क्रिमिनल नहीं, कोई जानवर नहीं, कोई नेचुरल डिजास्टर नहीं, बस HOA board. Michael took a deep breath. Let's just get it over with. As they stepped out, the soil felt wet even though it hadn't rained. Fog swirled around their ankles. और हवा में एक अजीब सी metallic smell थी, जैसे कोई मशीनरी चल रही हो या कुछ जल रहा हो. Michael looked around, but nothing seemed out of place except the strange silence. Not even dogs barking. Not even the usual distant car sounds. Zero. By the time they reached the HOA hall, almost everyone from the neighborhood had gathered there, some looking scared, some annoyed. Some simply tired of the endless rules. A large iron door had replaced the normal wooden one. किसी को याद नहीं कि कब ये चेंज किया गया था. Inside, the hall lights flickered. At the center stood the HOA president, Mr. Aldrich, his suit darker than usual, tie perfectly straight, and an even more unsettling smile on his face. The board members stood behind him like a row of silent statues, each holding a black binder. Good evening, residents, Mr. Aldrich said, microphone के बगैर भी आवाज फर्श से टकराती हुई गूंज रही थी. Tonight is a pivotal moment. People exchanged uneasy looks. We have detected severe non-compliance spreading across the community. His eyes scanned the room. And tonight, we address it. Michael felt Emily grip his hand. A man from the back raised his hand nervously. What does that mean exactly? Mr. Aldrich's smile widened. It means the community is sick, and we must cure it. Board members opened their binders in perfect synchronization. Pages flipped. One sound, like a single creature breathing. Mr. Aldrich snapped his fingers. The light shut off. A few gasps filled the room. Emily clung to Michael as total darkness swallowed everything. Then, one spotlight turned on, pointing to the center of the hall. And there stood a chair, a single metal bolted-down chair. A woman was tied to it. Tape over her mouth, arms strapped down, tears streaming as she shook violently. Michael's breath stopped. It was Mrs. Hanover. The entire room erupted into whispers. Mr. Aldrich raised a hand. Silence dropped again. This resident, he said slowly, has repeatedly failed to maintain community standards, missing meetings, failing to trim hedges correctly, and most importantly, he leaned close to her face. She speaks against us. Mrs. Hanover whimpered. A loud mechanical noise filled the hall, like a generator turning on beneath the floors. Emily whispered, Michael, what is happening? What is this? But Michael had no answer. His eyes were locked onto the chair as metal cuffs tightened further around Mrs. Hanover's wrists. Mr. Aldrich turned to the crowd. Tonight, each of you will vote on her fate. Compliance or removal, someone shouted. Before the man could step back, 2 HOA enforcers, big, masked, identical, grabbed him by the arms and forced him to his knees. The crowd gasped. The man screamed, Let me go! We never agreed to this! Mr. Aldrich's expression didn't change. You agreed when you signed your residency contract. A woman near the front burst into tears. We didn't know it meant this! We decide what it means, Aldrich replied coldly. Michael felt his heart pounding, but anger began to replace his fear. Enough was enough. He stepped forward, Emily tried to stop him, but he gently pulled his hand free. "No," Michael said loudly. "This is insane. You can't force us to choose something like this." The room turned silent again. Mr. Aldrich looked directly at him, eyes empty, unblinking. "Michael, I hoped you would speak. You've always been opinionated." Two enforcers stepped forward. Michael held his ground. "You're abusing power. You're torturing residents for minor issues. This isn't compliance. This is a cult." People behind him murmured. Some nodded. Others stepped slightly forward too. For a moment, it felt like maybe, just maybe, things would change. Then, Mr. Aldrich snapped his fingers again. A massive screen behind him lit up. Camera footage began playing. Footage of Michael mowing his lawn but stopping halfway. Michael leaving his trash can out for an extra hour. Michael parking slightly crooked one evening. His violations. Emily's voice shook. "You recorded everything?" Mr. Aldrich folded his hands behind his back. "We record everyone, at all times, for community integrity." Gasps spread across the hall. Then a new clip played. Footage of Michael and Emily talking in their backyard at night, whispering about how the HOA was getting too controlling. Emily covered her mouth in horror. "You spied on us in our own yard?" Michael: "We prefer the word monitoring," Aldrich said calmly. "But since you love speaking so boldly, perhaps you should take the first vote." Mrs. Hanover screamed through the tape. Michael stared at Aldrich, then at Hanover, then at the terrified faces around him. He knew this was a trap. They wanted him to take the first step so they could twist it against him. "No," Michael said. "I won't vote." Aldrich sighed. "Then you leave us no choice." He pointed. The enforcers rushed toward Michael. Emily screamed, running forward, trying to pull Michael back, but another enforcer restrained her. "Don't touch her," Michael roared, struggling violently. But they were too strong. They dragged him toward the center, toward the chair, toward Mrs. Hanover. Aldrich leaned into the microphone. Residents witnessed the first consequence of defiance. They strapped Michael into the second chair that rose from the floor as if summoned. He fought until his muscles burned, but the metal restraints clamped shut. Emily cried, "Stop it! Please! He didn't do anything!" Aldrich turned to her slowly. "Oh, my dear, he did everything." The room dimmed again. Machinery buzzed beneath the floor. Two chairs, side by side, two residents, both trembling, both helpless, and the board standing over them like executioners. Aldrich raised a small device with a single red button. "Tonight is the night we restore order." He pressed the button. The machinery roared. Both chairs jolted violently. Screams filled the hall. Neighbors panicked, pushing toward the exits, but the doors slammed shut automatically, locking everyone inside. Lights flickered wildly, sparks shooting from the ceiling fixtures. Aldrich spread his arms like a preacher. "Welcome to the age of total compliance." The entire building trembled. Fog pushed in under the doors. A metallic smell filled the air again. But no one realized it wasn't fog, it was gas. And outside, unseen in the darkness, more HOA members were arriving, with more binders, more rules, more consequences. And what happened next would change the community forever. When people speak about the breaking point in a story, they often imagine a single moment, something loud, violent, unmistakable. But in Crescent Heights, nothing ever broke suddenly. Everything cracked slowly, quietly, like ice under invisible pressure. When the collapse finally came, it wasn't the moment that surprised everyone. It was the realization that the collapse had been happening all along. And that realization began the morning after the failed escape. I remember standing at my window, staring at Michael and Emily's house. The once welcoming place now looked like a trapped animal's cage. Curtains torn aside, porch lights smashed, the front door replaced with a reinforced steel panel drilled directly into the frame. overnight, without their permission. The HOA could never admit they were behind it, but they were. Everyone knew. No one said it. At dawn, silent HOA contractors, men who always wore the same expressionless faces, arrived to secure the premises for community safety. Their vans blocked the street, their tools hummed through the fog, and every neighbor stood frozen behind their blinds, watching yet pretending not to watch. The house next door didn't just look like a prison. It smelled like one. It felt like one. And somewhere inside that house, Michael and Emily were still alive, still trapped, still being processed. But no one knew what that meant. Not exactly. Not until Ethan returned. He came back at noon, staggering down the street like someone who'd walked miles barefoot through a battlefield only he could see. His clothes were soaked with swamp water, streaked with mud and algae. His hands trembled. His eyes were wide, not with fear, but with clarity, as if whatever he'd found in the woods had peeled away the last layer of illusion. When he reached the cul-de-sac, he didn't run, didn't shout. He just walked straight toward me. I opened the door before he could knock. "You need to hear this," he said. I stepped aside silently, and he entered my living room. The moment he sat down, it felt like the temperature in the room dropped. Not from fear, though there was plenty of that, but from something colder. Truth. "They're not just monitoring the neighborhood," he began. "They're harvesting it." He took a shaky breath and pulled a damp notebook from inside his jacket. Pages were wrinkled, smeared, torn, but some diagrams survived. Strange patterns, circles within circles, underground pathways, pipes, sensors, compartments. "What is this?" I whispered. He stared at the drawings as if seeing them again hurt him. "The system," he said. "The one under the houses. The one beneath the pump station. The one they lied about." He pointed to a diagram, a wide tunnel beneath Crescent Heights segment. "This isn't drainage," he said. "This wasn't built by the city. They engineered all of it, the HOA, or whoever runs it." I swallowed hard. "Ethan, why? Why would a homeowners association need tunnels?" He closed the notebook. "It's not an HOA," he whispered. "It never was." Before I could reply, a sudden thud shook the front wall. Then another. Then a scraping sound, like something dragging along the siding. Ethan froze. I turned toward the window. Slowly, carefully, fearfully. 2 HOA compliance officers were standing outside my house. Not knocking, not asking questions, just standing. Their faces blank, their suits immaculate, their clipboards held at their sides like weapons. And worse, they weren't looking at me. They were looking at him. Ethan leaned close until his breath brushed my ear. "They know I told you." Another thud. This one louder. He grabbed my arm. "We need to go, now!" But fear is a strange thing. It doesn't always make you run. Sometimes it paralyzes you so completely that even breathing feels like a forbidden act. "Where?" I managed to whisper. "To the basement," he said. "Yours connects." "Connects to what?" I asked, though I already knew. "The system." He didn't wait for my answer. He pulled me toward the basement door. My legs obeyed before my mind did. As we stepped onto the stairs, the front doorknob rattled violently. Then, crack! Wood splintered. Screws tore loose. The door groaned under pressure. "They're letting themselves in," Ethan whispered. We moved faster, down the stairs, into the cold, unfinished basement where concrete walls seemed to throb with the heartbeat of machines buried behind them. Ethan rushed to the far wall and pressed his ear against it. "This one," he said. "Move the shelf." I grabbed the edge of the wooden shelf and pulled. The metal nails groaned and scraped across the concrete floor as we shoved it aside. Behind it, the wall revealed a panel outline, thin, almost invisible, like a door drawn only in pencil. Ethan dug his fingers under the edge and yanked. The panel snapped open. Behind it was darkness, but also the hum of hidden machinery, the faint scent of soil and rust. and a tunnel, wide enough for a person to crawl through, reinforced with metal ribs and crawling with thin, glowing cables. Ethan motioned for me to go first. Above us, footsteps creaked across my living room. Low voices murmured. Something heavy dragged. I shook my head in terror. I can't! He grabbed my face gently but firmly. You can. Because if you stay, they'll take you. They took Michael and Emily. They tried to take me. Don't give them another resident. The footsteps upstairs stopped. Silence. Then, boom! The basement door exploded inward. They were inside. Ethan shoved me. Go! I crawled into the tunnel, my hands slipping on cold metal. The glow from the wall cables illuminated just enough to show where to place my knees. Behind me, I heard Ethan pull the panel closed. Darkness swallowed us. But not complete darkness. Ahead, faint lights pulsed along the tunnel walls, pale blue and green, beating like veins. We moved deeper, crawling, sliding, gasping for breath. Above us, faint muffled sounds echoed through soil and concrete. Boots, voices, commands. They were searching the basement. They would find the panel, soon. But this tunnel system wasn't a dead end. It connected every house, every yard, every part of Crescent Heights. Nobody knew, because nobody ever questioned the subsurface utility fees included in HOA dues or the constant safety inspections. And then we heard it, a sound that didn't belong. A whisper, not from behind us, from ahead. We stopped. The whisper grew louder, strained, frantic. Help! Someone, please! A voice, a human voice. Ethan pushed forward, and I followed. The tunnel widened into a chamber, an underground maintenance node, circular and lit by flickering yellow lamps. And slumped against the wall, Michael. His face was pale, streaked with dirt and dried blood, his shirt torn, his breathing shallow, his hands bound with nylon restraints. He looked up at us with hollow eyes that still held the memory of sunlight he would never see again. Please, he rasped. You have to stop them. I dropped beside him. Michael, God, what did they do to you? His lips trembled. It's not just control, he whispered. Not just power. They're feeding it. Feeding what? Ethan asked. Michael's eyes darted around the chamber. There's something under us, he whispered. Not machines, not we're. My blood turned cold. Alive? He nodded weakly. They built Crescent Heights on top of it. The rules, the compliance. It's not about order. It's about keeping it calm, keeping it contained. Ethan stiffened. The tunnels, he said. The sensors. The pressure regulators. They're not measuring us, Michael whispered. They're measuring it. The ground trembled. We froze. Every muscle in my body seized. The lights flickered. Dust drifted from the ceiling. Something deep beneath us moved, slowly, massively, like a sleeping titan shifting under a blanket of earth. The whispering stopped. Silence returned. Then, the tunnel behind us echoed with footsteps, multiple, fast, getting closer. Ethan grabbed Michael's arm. We have to go, now. But where? I cried. He pointed to a ladder on the far side of the chamber, leading upward toward a sealed hatch. Surface exit, he said. Emergency access. We rushed to the ladder as Michael groaned in pain. Ethan climbed behind him, pushing him upward, while I pulled from above. The metal hatch overhead was rusted shut. I shoved it, kicked it, nothing. The footsteps grew louder. Voices, 2, 3, 4, maybe more. Ethan looked up at me. Try again. I slammed my shoulder into the hatch. Once, twice, a third time, crack! The seal snapped. A sliver of light cut through. I screamed in pure, desperate strength and pushed with everything I had. The hatch flew open. Cold air rushed in. Grass, night sky, freedom. We dragged Michael through the opening as Ethan climbed out behind us. We emerged behind the community playground, hidden by trees so perfectly trimmed They looked artificial. Ethan pulled the hatch closed. Below, the footsteps reached the chamber. Voices barked orders, but they didn't know which hatch we'd used. Not yet. For a brief second, we were safe. Then, something. A deep rumble shook the ground. Not small, not subtle. A violent shudder that made the swings rattle and the sandbox tremble. Birds scattered from the trees. Lawn lights flickered. A distant siren wailed, not from police, but from an underground source. Michael collapsed to his knees. "It's waking up," he whispered. His voice wasn't fearful. It was defeated. Ethan grabbed my arm. "We can either run," he said with a trembling breath, "or we can expose them." "How?" I asked. He pointed across the playground to the HOA community hall. Its windows were glowing, its doors slightly open, its underground generators humming with unnatural intensity. "That building," Ethan whispered, "is the nerve center. Everything they hide, everything they control, everything they fear, it's inside." And then he said the words that decided our fate. If we go in there, we might stop them. If we run, we're dead anyway. The ground trembled again, this time stronger. Lamps toppled, a bench slid across the grass as if pulled by an invisible force. Michael looked up, his voice breaking. "Whatever's under us, it's hungry." We all turned toward the HOA hall. Its lights pulsed, like an eye, watching, waiting, calling us. Ethan swallowed hard. "This is it," he said. "We finish it tonight." We stood there, 3 broken residents of a perfect neighborhood, staring at the building where the truth waited. The HOA was no longer just an association. It was a ritual, a containment system, a lie built to imprison something ancient and alive beneath Crescent Heights. And now that thing was waking up, and the only way to stop it was to walk straight into the heart of the monster that fed it. People assume that when evil reveals itself, it does so loudly, like an explosion or a scream. But the night Crescent Heights finally collapsed, the first sign wasn't sound. It was the silence. A silence so complete, so unnatural, it felt like the sky itself was holding its breath. No crickets, no wind, no distant freeway hum. Just an oppressive, suffocating stillness. Ethan, Michael, and I stood before the HOA community hall, its windows glowing pale blue, its walls vibrating with some subterranean pulse. Behind us, the playground lights flickered like dying stars. The tunnel rumble beneath our feet grew louder, angrier, as if something vast and restless pressed upward from the depths. "It's feeding," Michael whispered, voice cracking. "On what?" I asked. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. We all felt it. The pressure, the hunger, the slow, deliberate awakening of something that was never meant to wake. But Crescent Heights didn't panic. No one came outside. No one screamed. No lights turned on. Because the HOA had always prepared for this moment. And the residents? They weren't hiding. They were already under the HOA's control. Ethan pushed open the community hall doors. No resistance, no locks. They wanted us inside. The entrance was dim, lit by cool fluorescent bulbs that buzzed faintly overhead. The air smelled like disinfectant and old paint. But deeper inside, beneath the normality, there was another scent. Soil, moist earth, rotting wood, the smell of something ancient. We stepped forward. The doors slammed shut behind us. Michael flinched. I grabbed his arm. Ethan didn't even turn back. "Keep moving," he said. "Everything ends tonight." The control room. We walked down the main hallway, normally filled with HOA meeting flyers, community event posters, and motivational slogans about orderly living. But now the walls were bare, stripped clean. Only pale outlines remained where frames once hung. At the end of the corridor, a metal door pulsed with blue light seeping from its edges. Ethan reached for the handle. It wasn't locked. He pulled it open. The room inside wasn't an office. It was a nerve center. Monitors covered the walls, each showing live footage of Crescent Heights. Every house, every yard, every streetlight angle. Lines of code streamed across screens. Heartbeat-like waves pulsed across digital maps of the neighborhood. And in the center of the room, a massive, transparent cylinder, filled with swirling vapor and tangled networks of cables that looked less like wires and more like veins. Pulsing veins, alive, throbbing. Michael staggered forward, eyes widening. "That's it," he whispered. "That's the core." The cylinder vibrated. A deep, resonant hum vibrated the air. On one wall, a massive map of the neighborhood lit up in red. Under every house, tunnels glowed. Under every street, systems flickered. And beneath Crescent Heights, in the deepest part, a huge circular chamber pulsed with a heartbeat. Thump, thump, thump. Michael looked at the map and whispered, That's the creature." Before we could speak, footsteps echoed down the hallway behind us. Slow, rhythmic, confident. The kind of footsteps belonging to someone who already won. Marlene appeared in the doorway. Her pastel suit remained pristine, her smile perfectly controlled. But her eyes, they weren't the eyes of the woman who handed out lawn violations. They were shining, cold, almost feverish. "Good evening," she said softly. Ethan stepped in front of us. "What are you?" he asked. She tilted her head. "President of the association," she answered. "Protector of Crescent Heights." Michael shook his head violently. "No," he whispered. "You're its guardian." Her smile widened. "At last," she said. "Someone understands." She walked slowly toward the core. "When we built this community, we discovered it sleeping beneath the land. Something older than the soil, older than the town, older than every home built on top of it." I shivered. "What is it?" "A being," she whispered. "Blind, immense, hungry." "Why feed it?" Ethan shouted. "Because if it wakes fully," she replied, "it will rise." The floor trembled. Dust fell from the ceiling. A monitor cracked. The core's glow brightened. Marlene turned toward us, eyes blazing. The structure, the rules, the violations, the surveillance, it's all to keep people in line, to keep them predictable, calm, quiet. Her smile. "Because chaos wakes it." The ground quaked violently. Sirens blared. Red alarms flashed across screens. Subsurface pressure. Critical chamber 12. Crack detected. Creature movement. Unstable. Core capacity 97%. Michael fell to his knees. "It's waking. It's waking." Ethan grabbed the edge of a control panel. "Shut it down," he yelled. Marlene laughed. A clear, ringing laugh that echoed off every wall. "You think I control it?" she asked. "No one controls it. We only satisfy it." Ethan grabbed a heavy monitor and smashed it against the core cylinder. It cracked. Marlene's eyes widened in fury. "No!" She lunged, but the ground trembled and knocked her off balance. Ethan slammed the monitor again. The core cracked further. Blue vapor hissed out. A deep roar rose from beneath the neighborhood. The walls trembled. Lights exploded overhead. Michael covered his ears. "Ethan, stop if the core breaks." "It dies," Ethan shouted. "No!" A massive jolt knocked us off our feet. The cylinder exploded. Blue mist filled the control room. Alarms screamed. Screens shattered. The ground heaved upward like something beneath it was stretching. Marlene dragged herself to a console, fingers bleeding. "We still have time," she whispered. "We can still calm it." She hit a button. A siren blared across Crescent Heights. A low rhythmic tone pulsed. Order, order, order. Every house light turned on simultaneously. Every sprinkler activated in perfect harmony. Every garage opened at the same time. It was the neighborhood's ritual. A calming signal, a lullaby. But this time, it didn't work. The creature roared again, more powerful, more conscious. The floor split. A crack tore through the room. Marlene screamed as a fissure opened beneath her. Swallowing her console, she dangled from the edge, fingers slipping. "Help me," she cried. Ethan ran to grab her hand. "No," I shouted. "She'll destroy us." "She might know how to seal it," he yelled back. He grabbed her wrist. For a moment, it looked like she might survive. Then she looked him in the eyes and smiled. "You don't deserve this neighborhood." She let go of him first. Then she let go of the ledge and disappeared into the darkness below. Ethan collapsed backward in shock. The ground jolted again. Michael crawled toward a second console. "There's a manual override," he whispered. "A sealing protocol, old, buried in the system." He typed frantically, bleeding onto the keys. A screen flickered. "Manual sealing sequence requires core deactivation, tunnel flooding, surface evacuation, site sacrifice." "Sacrifice?" I whispered. Michael nodded weakly. "One person has to stay and trigger the lock from inside. Otherwise, the creature will crawl out before the tunnels collapse." Ethan stood up slowly. You've already risked everything." Michael coughed violently. "I can't run," he whispered. "My body, it's done." I shook my head. "No, we find another way." "There is no other way," he said softly. He placed his hand on the console. "It has to end." Ethan grabbed his shoulder. "You'll die." Michael smiled sadly. "I already did the moment they took me underground." He pressed the final key. A countdown began. Tunnel collapse in 60 seconds. The entire building shook violently. Lights died. Sirens wailed. Michael shoved us toward the exit. "Go!" Ethan resisted, tears running down his face. "Michael, please, don't! Go!" I pulled Ethan by the arm. We ran down the hallway as the floor buckled behind us. Ceilings cracked, pipes burst. The community hall groaned like a dying animal. We crashed through the front doors, just as the ground split open behind us. A geyser of blue vapor shot into the sky. Then, boom! The entire building collapsed inward. Tunnels caved. Soil fell like a landslide. The earth swallowed Crescent Heights' deepest secret, and Michael with it. Ethan and I ran across the park as cracks spread like lightning beneath our feet. A geyser erupted behind the clubhouse. The playground collapsed into a sinkhole. Then, finally, silence returned. Not the unnatural silence from before, a real one, a peaceful one. The creature below had been sealed again. Perhaps forever. Epilogue. 6 months later, Crescent Heights no longer exists. The government cordoned off the area. Every house demolished, every street dug up, every tunnel filled with reinforced concrete. Ethan moved 3 states away. He still has nightmares. So do I. Michael? His memorial stone stands near the lake outside town. The inscription reads, "He saved us all, even when no one believed him." Sometimes, late at night, when the wind is still, I swear I can feel the faintest vibration beneath the earth. Not dangerous, not rising, just breathing. But the HOA? Their records vanished, their files burned, their employees disappeared. No one knows who they really were, what they protected, what they worshipped. And sometimes, when I close my eyes, I think of Marlene's last smile. Cold, knowing, final. Because the truth about Crescent Heights isn't that something slept beneath it. The truth is that someone always knew, and someone always will. The HOA wasn't a mistake. It was a warning we barely survived, and maybe, just maybe, it wasn't the only one.